Alright, so we're looking at lesson 6-2, fractions and decimals, on page 146. Alright, so how can you write equivalent fractions and decimals? We just finished a topic where we wrote equivalent fractions. So we found different fractions that were equivalent to each other. So now what we're going to do is possibly find an equivalent fraction and also be able to turn that fraction into a decimal. So let's look at this. A banana slug moves through the forest in Northern California at a rate of about 1/20th of an inch per minute. So we want to find out which decimal is equivalent or equal to 1/20th. Alright, look on page 147. Here's one way. Fractions can be written in equivalent forms, right? So we can write in a fraction and then write another fraction that's equivalent to it. So a fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, 1000, and so on can be written as a decimal fairly easily. So if we can change 1/20th to an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 1/100ths, then we can write it in a decimal form. So what can we do? So here's my 1/20th. What can I do to make my 20ths hundredths? Well, we multiply 20 by 5 to get 100ths. So again, remember, we want to make an equivalent fraction. So we actually are multiplying by 5 over 5, which is 1. So we aren't changing the amount of 1/20th. So we're going to multiply 20 by 5 to get 100, which means we also have to then multiply the 1 by 5 to get the 5. So a fraction equivalent to 1/20th is 5/100ths. Now think about, just listen to 5/100ths, and you should figure out how you would write that as a decimal. So down here I have 1/20th is equal to, and here it's written 5/100ths, 0.05. Remember, here's my decimal. To the right of the decimal I have the tenths place, the hundredths place, then it would be the thousandths, 10,000ths, and so on. So the 5 is in the hundredths place here to show 5/100ths. Okay, so that's one way. Okay, make sure you're taking notes here on that past way. And here is another way. Now, normally we do this if you can't change your denominator into hundredths or tenths or thousandths. But they're just going to show you anyway. So remember how we talked about how a fraction, like 1/20th, is also written, or can also be written as a division problem, like numerator divided by denominator, or 1 divided by 20. So you can actually find the decimal form of a fraction by taking the numerator, as they put here, put it in the box here. I'm dividing into 1. I'm dividing by 20 outside of the box. And make sure, you can see here, 1 is a whole number. I cannot add these zeros without making sure my decimal's there. Okay? Otherwise I would make it 100 over 20, and that's not what we have. So make sure that you put your decimal there. And then you can go ahead and work out the problem. 20 cannot go into 1, so they put a 0 there. They look at 10, right? And it cannot go into 10, so they put the 0 over that tenths place. But it can go into 100. How many times? 5 over that 0, that would make 100. 5 times 20 is 100. Subtract to have a remainder of 0. So here's my equivalent decimal to 1/20th. So there's two different ways. If you can make the fraction have a denominator, equivalent fraction that has the denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, or 10,000 even. If you cannot do that, then you just have to divide the numerator by the denominator like they did here in the other way. Okay, we're looking back at the guided practice on page 146. It's asking you to write a decimal and a fraction in simplest form. Okay, here we go, simplest form. You've learned that in the last topic, for each shaded area. So we're going to look at the shaded area. In number 1, notice I have this block, right, this square, and it's divided into tenths, 10 pieces. So I know that my denominator is 10. And how many pieces are shaded? Well, you can count them. 2. remember to pause me and you try these. So there's a fraction, but is it in simplest form? No. So I would want to divide by the greatest common factor, which would be 2 over 2, and I would get 1/5. Okay, now 1/5 doesn't help me write a decimal. 2/10 does, right? Because my denominator is in tenths. So how would I write 2/10? Well, right, 2/10, 2 in the tenths place, and then again, there's my fraction in simplest form. Do number 2. You pause me and then hit play when you're ready to check. So again, we have this box, but instead of being divided into 10 pieces, it's like the hundreds grid, right? Each tenth is divided into 10 little pieces, so I have 100 pieces. Well, how many are shaded? Well, there's 10 in each column, so I have 10, 20, 30, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 36 hundredths shaded. Now that'll help me to write a decimal, right? I can write a decimal 36 hundredths. My 6 should be in that hundredth spot, which it is. But it isn't in simplest form. So I want to make sure that I divide, and let's go ahead and divide by 2 over 2. And that would get me 18/50ths. And I'm still, not in simplest form. I can divide by 2 over 2 again, and that would give me 9/25ths. Now, that would be simplest form. Okay, so for homework, what I'm going to have you guys do is go ahead and finish 3, 4, and 5, which basically just wants you to write each fraction as a decimal. So you can find an equivalent fraction with a denominator of tenths, hundredths, thousandths, or you can always divide the numerator by the denominator to make your decimal. And bring it to class tomorrow with a question. See you then.